Hello and thank you so much for tuning into FunAhead TV. In today's episode, actually we're going to do a little bit of a throwback situation. We're going to go back to many months ago when we were talking about my friend's 911SC. I believe it's a 1978 911SC. A friend of his was driving that car and actually money shifted it. So he went 1, 2, 1 on the transmission, and so completely over revved the car and bent several valves, and it caused him to have to rebuild the engine. I covered some of the engine rebuild process at the very beginning with the breakdown of the engine, but I did end up filming a little bit more after that initial video that I posted to my channel. Actually, you can watch that here, where we were talking about the lifter carrier and kind of just the architecture of those engines. Kind of unique, very interesting, and very different from an M96 engine. So anyway, it's kind of a short and sweet video, but you know, you might learn something, so please enjoy. What is up, FunAhead fans? We are back at the FunAhead headquarters and we're working on the air-cooled 911 again. So today is a continuation of just cleaning parts. Sorry, the air compressor is running. But we've got a lot of the parts on the table right now, looking at the cam towers again, and we've got some cylinder heads here, so we can kind of talk over that. So let's look at some stuff. So I just wanted to show you guys some kind of cool stuff that I previously did not know. So here's one of the rockers, obviously, which was not here previously, and so those go in here. They're pretty tight tolerance. Those go in here. But one thing that I think is so cool, where did I put it? Oh, this is the pin that holds the rocker in place. And so the only thing that holds these in is this bolt that actually, you know, it's kind of cone shaped, that goes inside of this. And it actually has this nut on the other side of it. And so as they clamp, it like pushes out on the outer surface here and holds these pins, these dowel pins, in place. That's the only thing that holds those in place. How freaking sweet is that? Another cool thing about the air-cooled 911s is the rockers are full-time in contact with the cam. They don't have any kind of roller or anything. So that's one thing that's kind of sweet. So another thing we're working on, here are the cylinder heads. Elon has sandblasted the crap out of these, so you can see they're super clean. But got the brand new valves in them. We just lapped them, so they're these, and then got a box O valves here, unlapped. Haven't lapped them yet, but we just lapped cylinder head number 3. So the exhaust and the intake valves are completely lapped, sealing, and ready to go. Another thing, we were talking about the head studs in the previous video, and I mentioned on bank 1 we had quite an issue stripping out one of the head studs. This was that nut. So this is the same nut on top of the head stud. So it was at an angle, and it was one of these spots here. Actually, I believe it was, I think it might have been this one. But you can't get your wrench perfectly down in there because the nut itself kind of sits down at an angle like this. So it was sitting down like this, and we couldn't perfectly get the wrench on it, unfortunately. So having it at an angle, unfortunately we stripped it out, but we actually had to take a saw. So of course, if you imagine this cylinder head upside down, we had to take a saw. You can kind of see through the holes here where you would put your wrench to get to the head bolt, the head stud nut. So we had to take a saw and cut through it, and that's actually how we got this nut cut in half. Ended up being able to take off the stud. So we talked about the new valves, but we discussed a little bit the old valves in the last video, in the part 1, when they were still in the head. So this is one of the old exhaust valves, obviously now taken out of the cylinder head that it was in. So obviously at the time, we couldn't tell how well the valve was seating into the head. But we knew they were most likely bent and they were most likely leaking. So now that they're out of the head, you know, you still can't just by looking at it tell if it's significantly bent or not. If we put it in a drill, which I will do now, you can clearly see as it spins that puppy has some movement to it. So this valve is very clearly bent, and that is the reason why all of the valves are getting replaced. So clearly this one kissed the piston pretty hard and probably multiple times.
All right, now stepping through the process just a little bit, here's an image of when Elon initially got the engine out. Then the engine sitting up on a stand, partially disassembled. Next, we can see the lifter carrier and cylinder heads have been removed from the engine. So for the first time, we were able to see what the actual damage was, if any, to the pistons. And you can clearly see, looking at the pistons, that the valves did in fact make contact with them, obviously, hence the reason they were bent. Jumping forward a little bit, here's the engine in the completely reassembled stage just before getting the intake parts put on it and before getting put up into the car. And speaking of going back up into the car,